The room was pitch black, save for the faint green glow of the LED monitor on my desk. I sat in my wheelchair in the corner of the guest bedroom, staring at the screen. The hidden camera feed from my study downstairs was crisp and clear in night vision mode. On the screen, a woman was kneeling on the floor in front of my Mosler TL30 floor safe. She was wearing headphones, and the bell of a stethoscope was pressed against the cold steel door of the vault. It was Shelby, my daughter-in-law. To my son, Ethan, she was the devoted wife who insisted on moving in to take care of Dad while I recovered from cataract surgery. But to me, right now, she looked like an amateur trying to play a grandmaster's game. I watched her turn the dial, left 4 times, right 3 times. She paused, listening for the contact points. She was hunting for the gates in the wheel pack. I sipped my coffee, shaking my head. "You're too heavy on the contact points, Shelby," I whispered to the empty room. "And you're listening for a click when you should be feeling for the slide." She swore silently on the screen, wiping sweat from her forehead. She reset the dial and tried again. She was desperate. I could see it in the way her hands shook. She thought I was upstairs, fast asleep, drooling into my pillow thanks to the warm milk she had brought me an hour ago. She didn't know I had poured the milk down the sink, and she certainly didn't know that the combination she was looking for, the birthday of her husband, my son, was a decoy I had set 30 years ago. She spun the dial again. It stopped. She yanked the handle. It didn't budge. She kicked the safe in frustration. I leaned back in my chair. She was persistent, I'll give her that. But what she was about to do next, the item she would pull from her bag to escalate this burglary, would change everything. I thought she was just a greedy girl looking for a quick payout. I didn't know she was dangerous. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you respect the craft and despise a thief who steals from family, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Let's crack this case open. My name is Sam Vance. For 40 years, I didn't just open doors, I opened vaults. I was a master safe technician for Diebold and Mosler. If a bank in Chicago had a jammed timer or a locked-out vault door, they called me. I've manipulated tumblers with my fingertips that are sensitive enough to feel a piece of paper slide between steel plates. I know mechanisms. I know that a lock is an honest thing. It either opens or it doesn't. It doesn't lie to you. It doesn't smile at you while hiding a knife behind its back. People are different. People are sloppy. I retired 5 years ago. I made a good living, and I didn't trust the stock market. I converted my pension and my savings into something tangible: gold eagles, bullion, coins. About $2 million worth at current prices. I kept it right here in the house, in a floor safe poured into 3 feet of reinforced concrete in my study. It's a TL30 rated unit. That means it's tool resistant for 30 minutes against professional attack. Against an amateur, it's a tomb. I lost my wife, Mary, 3 years ago. Since then, it's just been me and the quiet. My son, Ethan, is a good kid, but he's soft. He's an accountant. He sees the world in spreadsheets. He met Shelby 2 years ago. She was a cocktail waitress with a hard luck story and eyes big enough to drown in. Ethan fell hard. I tried to warn him. I told him that some people are like cheap locks, pretty on the outside, but the mechanism is full of rust. He didn't listen. They got married last summer. Last month, I had surgery to remove cataracts in both eyes. The recovery was rough. My vision was blurry and I couldn't drive. Ethan insisted I needed help. "Dad," he said, sitting at my kitchen table, "Shelby wants to help. She can stay here for a few weeks, cook, clean, drive you to appointments. Please, it would make me feel better." I looked at Shelby. She was standing by the sink, looking modest and eager. "I'd love to, Sam, really. It's the least I can do." I agreed. I wanted to believe she was genuine. I wanted to believe my son had chosen well. So she moved into the guest room down the hall. For the first week, she was an angel. The house was clean. Dinner was on the table at 6. She drove me to the clinic and held my arm when I stumbled. I started to think I had misjudged her. I started to relax. But an old safecracker never stops checking the dial. It started with the small things, the inciting incident. Every night before I go to bed, I perform a ritual. I go into my study, check the window locks, and I check the safe. I always, without fail, park the dial at exactly 50. It's at the 12 o'clock position. It allows me to see instantly if anyone has touched it. 3 days ago, I walked into the study at 6 a.m. The sun was just coming up. I looked down at the safe floor plate. The rug covering it was slightly askew. I pulled the rug back. The dial wasn't at 50. It was resting at 15. 15 is the day of Ethan's birthday. I stood there staring at the black plastic wheel. My heart gave a painful thump. It wasn't the cleaning lady. It wasn't a ghost. Someone had tried to open it using the most obvious number in my life. "Shelby," I whispered. Later that morning, I walked into the kitchen. Shelby was making eggs. She looked fresh, happy. "Morning, Sam," she chirped. "How did you sleep?" "Fine," I lied, sitting down. The house was quiet. "So quiet," she agreed, pouring me juice. "I slept like a log." She was lying. I checked the hallway runner. It had the faint indentations of footsteps leading to the study. I didn't confront her. In my line of work, you don't drill until you know exactly where the locking bolts are. If I accused her now, she'd cry, Ethan would defend her, he'd say I was paranoid, confusing numbers because of my bad eyes. He'd say I bumped the dial myself. No, I needed to see her do it. That afternoon, a package arrived from Amazon. I met the delivery driver at the door before Shelby could get there. The label said medical supplies. I opened it in the garage. Inside was a stethoscope, a Littman Cardiology 4, top of the line, the kind doctors use to hear heart murmurs, or the kind safe techs use to hear tumblers fall. I taped the box back up and left it on the counter. When Shelby found it, she smiled at me. "Oh, my blood pressure kit arrived. I want to make sure we monitor your heart while you're recovering, Sam." "That's thoughtful," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "Very thoughtful." That night, while she was out picking up dinner, I installed the pinhole camera in the spine of a 3-ring binder on the bookshelf facing the safe. I linked it to a private server on my iPad. Now, sitting here in the dark, watching her sweat over the combination, the betrayal hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just the money, it was the fact that she was using my son's love as a cover to rob his inheritance. She tried the handle again, locked tight. Then she did something that made me sit up straight. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. She dialed a number, she put it on speaker and set it on the floor while she spun the dial. "I can't open it," she hissed into the phone. "You said you had the combo," a man's voice answered. It wasn't Ethan. It was rough, impatient. "I'm working on it," Shelby whispered violently. "The old man is tougher than he looks. Just give me another day." She hung up. She put her head in her hands and began to cry. I zoomed in on the screen. Blackmail. She wasn't just greedy. She was trapped. She had a secret life, and someone was charging her admission to keep it. I watched her for another 10 minutes. Then she packed up the stethoscope, smoothed the rug over the safe, and crept out of the room. I waited until I heard her bedroom door click shut. Then I rolled my wheelchair back to the bed. I didn't sleep. My mind was racing, analyzing the tumblers of the situation. She was desperate. Desperate people are sloppy, but they are also dangerous. If she couldn't manipulate the lock, she would eventually try force. Little did I know, force was exactly what she had planned for the weekend, and she wasn't just going to drill the safe, she was going to try to drill me out of the picture permanently. The next morning, the smell of burnt bacon filled the kitchen. I wheeled myself in, fiending a grogginess I didn't feel. Shelby was standing at the stove, hacking at a pan with a metal spatula. She looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, the result of a night spent failing to open a box that I had designed to stay shut. "Morning, Sam," she said, her voice tight. "Hungry?"
"Starving," I said, locking the brakes on my chair. "Did you sleep well?" She dropped the spatula. It clattered loudly against the stovetop. "Not really," she muttered, picking it up. "I thought I heard noises, like scratching. Maybe we have mice." "Old houses settle, Shelby," I said, pouring myself coffee. "Wood expands and contracts. Metal, too." She shot me a sharp look, searching my face for double meanings. I kept my expression blank, blowing on the steam of my dark roast.
The back door opened, and my son, Ethan, walked in. He was wearing his running gear, flushed and sweating from a 5-mile jog. He kissed Shelby on the cheek and squeezed my shoulder. "Hey, Dad," Ethan said, grabbing a water bottle. "How's the eye?" "Blurry," I lied, "but getting better." Shelby turned off the burner. She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. She looked at Ethan, putting on her worried wife face. "Ethan," she said softly, "we need to talk about your dad." I paused, the coffee cup halfway to my mouth. Here it came, the pivot. She couldn't open the safe, so she needed to neutralize the guard. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked, looking concerned. "He was wandering last night," she whispered, loud enough for me to hear. "I woke up at 3 a.m. He was in the study. He was talking to the wall, checking the windows. He seemed really confused, Ethan. He didn't even recognize me." Ethan turned to me, his brow furrowed. "Dad, is that true?" I looked at my son. I saw the worry in his eyes. He trusted her. If I called her a liar right now, I would sound defensive. I would sound exactly like the paranoid old man she was painting me to be. "I don't remember that," I mumbled, setting the cup down with a purposeful tremor. "I thought I slept through the night." "See?" Shelby sighed, giving Ethan a meaningful look. "He doesn't remember. Dr. Aris said the anesthesia could cause lingering confusion. Sundowning, they call it. I'm worried he might hurt himself." She walked over to the counter and picked up the Littman stethoscope, the tool she had bought to crack my safe. "Let me check your vitals, Sam." She wrapped the cuff around my arm. "I want to make sure your heart rate is steady." She pumped the bulb. She pressed the cold metal disc to the crook of my arm. She wasn't listening to my pulse. She was establishing dominance. She was showing me she controlled my care. "It's high," she lied, unwrapping the cuff. "Borderline hypertensive. You need rest, Sam. Complete quiet." I let her play doctor. I let her think she was winning, because while she was distracted with her performance, I noticed something sticking out of her purse on the kitchen island. It was a folded brochure, orange and black, the colors of Home Depot's rental department. After breakfast, Ethan went to shower. Shelby went outside to take a call, likely her blackmailer demanding an update. I rolled over to the purse. I didn't touch it. She might have placed a hair or a marker. Instead, I used a pair of long barbecue tongs from the drawer to gently lift the flap of the bag without disturbing the bag. It wasn't just a general brochure. It was a rental contract carbon copy. Item: Hilti DD150U Diamond Core Drill. Rental period: this weekend. Notes: extra bit included. Concrete penetration. I slid the paper back. My heart was pounding, but not from hypertension. She was done with manipulation. She was moving to brute force. She realized she couldn't pick the lock, so she was going to drill it. But a diamond core drill is loud. It screams like a banshee when it cuts through reinforced concrete. She couldn't do that while Ethan and I were in the house. She needed us gone. 10 minutes later, Shelby came back inside. She was smiling now, a bright, brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I have a great idea," she announced as Ethan walked back into the kitchen, toweling off his hair. "Ethan, you've been working so hard, and Sam needs peace and quiet away from the city noise." I gripped the armrests of my chair. "My cousin has a cabin up at Lake Geneva. He said we can use it this weekend. Why don't you take your dad up there? Just the two of you. Some father-son bonding, fishing, fresh air." "That sounds nice," Ethan said, looking at me. "But what about you? Aren't you coming?"
"Oh, I wish I could," Shelby sighed, putting her hand on his chest. "But I have to stay here. I scheduled the fumigators. Remember I mentioned the mice? We have to tent the place. It's unsafe for you guys to be here with the chemicals." Fumigators, the perfect cover. Tenting the house meant big, heavy tarps covering the windows. It meant noise was muffled. It meant no neighbors would think it strange if they heard drilling or saw workmen going in and out. She wasn't just drilling the safe, she was turning my house into a sealed bunker for her crime. "I don't know," Ethan hesitated. "Can Dad handle the trip?" "I think it would be good for him," Shelby urged. "Please, babe, do it for me. I'll handle the bugs. You just relax." Ethan looked at me. "What do you think, Dad? Up for some fishing?" I looked at Shelby. She was watching me like a hawk, daring me to object. If I said no, she'd ramp up the medical incompetence angle. If I stayed, she couldn't drill. But if I left, she'd have 48 hours alone with my vault. But she didn't know about the mechanism inside. She didn't know that my floor safe was outfitted with a glass relocker, a pane of tempered glass behind the drill plate. If she hit it with a drill bit, the glass would shatter, firing spring-loaded steel bolts into the frame, locking the safe permanently. It would require a plasma torch to open after that, but a torch takes time, and it leaves a mess. "I'd love to go fishing," I said, offering a small smile. "I haven't been to the lake in years." Shelby let out a breath she'd been holding. "Perfect. You guys leave Friday morning." I needed to prepare, not for a fishing trip, but for a war. That afternoon, I waited until Shelby was napping, likely researching drill points on YouTube. I wheeled myself into my study. I locked the door. I went to the safe. I spun the dial. 10/22/68, my wedding anniversary. The bolt clicked. I lifted the heavy door on its hydraulic strut. Inside lay stacks of gold bars, heavy plastic tubes of eagle coins, and legal documents. It was beautiful. It was my life's work. I started moving it. It took me 2 hours. My arms burned, my eyes strained, but I replaced every single bar of gold with lead weights I had in the basement from my old reloading bench. They looked identical in shape, especially in the dim light of the safe. Then I reached into my desk drawer. I pulled out a manila envelope I had prepared a week ago, just in case my suspicions were wrong. But they weren't wrong. I put the envelope on top of the lead weights. Inside were the papers Shelby would find instead of gold. I closed the safe. I spun the dial. I parked it at 50. On Friday morning, Ethan loaded the car. Shelby kissed him goodbye, acting the part of the doting wife. She hugged me, smelling of perfume and deceit. "Have fun, Sam," she whispered. "Don't worry about a thing." "I won't," I said. "You take care of the house." As we drove away, I watched her in the side mirror. She wasn't waving. She was pulling her phone out, already dialing the blackmailer. She thought the timer had started. She didn't realize it was counting down for her. "Dad," Ethan said as we hit the highway, "you seem quiet." "I'm thinking about bait," I said, watching the miles tick by. "Bait?" "Yeah, you have to use the right bait to catch the big ones, and you have to wait until they swallow the hook before you yank the line." I checked my watch. We would drive for an hour, just enough time for her to set up the drill, just enough time for her to think she was safe, and then we were turning around. We had been on the road for exactly 55 minutes. The city skyline was shrinking in the rearview mirror, replaced with the flat gray expanse of Illinois farmland. Ethan was driving with the radio on low, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who believed his life was perfectly in order. "Dad," I said, putting a hand to my forehead, "pull over." "What? Are you sick?" Ethan glanced at me, his foot already hovering over the brake. "My drops," I winced, rubbing my eye theatrically. "The steroid drops for the inflammation. Shelby packed the bag, but I don't see the blue bottle. Check the console." Ethan pulled onto the shoulder. He rummaged in the center console and the toiletry bag in the back. "I see the blood pressure cuff, Dad, but no drops. Are you sure you didn't leave them on the counter?" "I must have," I groaned. "I need them. The elevated pressure behind the lens. Dr. Aris said if I miss a dose within 4 hours, I risk retinal detachment. It's blinding pain." It was a lie, of course. My eyes were healing fine. But I knew 2 things. Ethan was terrified of medical emergencies, and Shelby had spent the last 3 days convincing me I was fragile. "We have to go back," Ethan said, checking his watch. "It's an hour drive. We'll lose the morning fishing window." "I'm sorry, son. Maybe Shelby can meet us halfway. Call her." Ethan pulled out his phone. He dialed Shelby. I watched the screen. It rang and rang, then voicemail. "She's not picking up," Ethan frowned. "Probably prepping for the fumigators." "Try the landline," I suggested. He tried. No answer. "That's weird. The land phone has the loud ringer. She should hear it." "Maybe she's outside," I said. "Let's just drive back. If we hurry, we can grab them and turn right back around. She won't even know we were there."
Ethan sighed, whipped the car around in a U-turn and punched the gas. "Hold on, Dad. We'll be there by 10:30. The drive back was tense. Ethan called Shelby 4 more times. Each time, silence. He started to worry, not about the robbery, but about her. What if she fell? What if she had a reaction to the fumigation chemicals? "Just drive, Ethan," I said gently. We pulled into our neighborhood just after 10:30 a.m. As we turned onto our street, I sat up straighter. I scanned the property. There were no circus tents over the house, no exterminator trucks. But there was a vehicle in the driveway, a white panel van. It had a Herc's Equipment Rental magnetic decal on the side. "Who is that?" Ethan slowed down, pulling into the driveway behind the van. "That's not the pest control company." "Looks like a contractor," I said. We got out. The silence of the suburbs was broken by a sound that made Ethan stop in his tracks. It wasn't the hiss of gas or the scuttling of mice. Screech! It was a high-pitched, grinding mechanical shriek, a sound of metal eating stone. It vibrated through the soles of our shoes on the front porch. "What is that noise?" Ethan asked, looking at the front door. It was locked. I pulled out my keys. "Sounds like construction, son." "But Shelby said she was fumigating," Ethan said, confusion clouding his face. "Why would there be power tools?" I unlocked the door. We stepped into the foyer. The noise was deafening now. It was coming from the study down the hall. The air was thick with gray dust, concrete dust. It hung in the light beams like fog. "Shelby?" Ethan shouted. She couldn't hear him. The core drill was screaming at decibels meant for outdoor sights. Ethan ran down the hall. I followed as fast as my condition allowed, though in reality I moved silently on the balls of my feet. The door to the study was ajar. Ethan pushed it open. He stopped dead. The room looked like a demolition zone. A plastic tarp was taped to the bookshelves, but the concrete dust covered everything. In the center of the room, Shelby was on her knees. She wasn't wearing her nice housewife cardigan. She was wearing a tank top, sweatpants, and heavy industrial safety goggles. She was wrestling with a massive orange Hilti drill rig that was bolted into my hardwood floor. The diamond bit was grinding deep into the concrete surrounding the floor safe. "Ethan!" Shelby started, unable to process the image. "Shelby?" She didn't hear him. She leaned her weight on the drill press handle, sweat pouring down her back. Crack! A sound louder than the drill echoed through the room, a sharp, distinct snap of breaking glass. Shelby let out a scream of frustration and slammed her hand against the drill motor. She killed the power. The screaming whine died down, leaving a ringing silence. "Damn it!" she shrieked at the safe. "Stupid, useless thing, open!" She had hit the glass relocker. My security system had worked. The pane of tempered glass behind the lock mechanism had shattered, triggering the spring-loaded bolts. The safe was now sealed tighter than the pharaoh's tomb. "Ethan!" Shelby said again, her voice trembling. She spun around. Her face was streaked with gray mud, a mix of concrete dust and sweat. Her eyes went wide behind the goggles. She looked like a raccoon caught in a trash can. "Ethan?"
she gasped, pulling the goggles off. "You're supposed to be fishing. And you're supposed to be killing mice, but it looks like you're trying to kill my retirement fund instead," I said, stepping into the room behind my son. Ethan looked at the massive drill. He looked at the floor safe, surrounded by slurry and rubble. He looked at his wife. The denial broke. The reality crashed down on him. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Are you robbing us?" "No!" Shelby scrambled to her feet, wiping her dusty hands on her pants. "Ethan, baby, no, it's not what it looks like. I lost my ring, my diamond ring. It fell into the ventilation duct, and I was just trying to retrieve it." It was such a pathetic lie that I almost laughed. "You bolted a commercial core drill to the floor to find a ring?" I asked. "And you rented it 3 days before you supposedly lost this ring?" Shelby ignored me. She focused on Ethan. She stepped toward him, reaching out with muddy hands. "Ethan, please, I was scared to tell you. I know how much that ring meant. I just wanted to fix it before you got home." Ethan took a step back. He looked at the safe. He looked at the phone sitting on the floor next to the drill. It was on a call. The timer read 14:02. Someone was listening. "Who are you talking to?" Ethan demanded, leaning in. The line went dead. Click. Ethan turned back to Shelby. His face wasn't confused anymore. It was pale with a kind of hurt that never heals. "Who was that, Shelby? Why do you need $50,000? And what pictures?" Shelby collapsed onto the dusty floor, burying her face in her hands. The sobbing started, the hysterical, panicked crying of a cornered animal. "I didn't mean to," she wailed. "It was just a mistake. He's my ex. He tricked me, Ethan. He filmed us when we were dating, and now he says he'll post it online if I don't pay him. I was just trying to save our marriage." "Save our marriage? By drilling into my father's floor safe?" "She had to," she screamed. "Sam has millions in there, just sitting there. He doesn't even use it. We needed it more than him." "We?" I interjected. "There is no we here, Shelby. There's just you." Ethan walked over to the window. He looked out at the street. He took a deep breath. He turned back to her. "Pack your bags," Ethan said. "What?" Shelby looked up, mascara running down her cheeks through the dust. "Pack your bags," Ethan repeated. "Get out of my father's house." "But the blackmailer," she pleaded. "Ethan, he's going to ruin me." "He can't ruin you," I said calmly, "because you've already ruined yourself. But before you leave, Shelby, there's one thing you should know." I walked over to the safe. It was covered in gray sludge. The dial was smashed. "You did a lot of work here," I said. "You rented the drill, you planned the fumigation, you played the nurse, but you forgot one rule of the trade." "What rule?" she sniffled. "Always check the payload before you steal the truck," I said. "Even if you had opened this safe, you wouldn't have found the gold." "What?" she blinked. "I moved the bullion 2 days ago," I said, looking at my son. "The only things inside that safe are some lead fishing weights and an envelope." "An envelope?" Ethan asked. "Yes," I said, looking at my son. "It contains copies of the surveillance photos I took of Shelby meeting her blackmailer last week. He's not her ex, Ethan. He's her bookie. She owes 50 grand for online poker debts." Shelby froze. The blackmail story was just another lie to gain sympathy. The truth was far more mundane. "Gambling?" Ethan stared at her. "You lied about everything, even the reason you were stealing." "Get out," Ethan said. He wasn't whispering now. He was roaring. Shelby scrambled up. She grabbed her purse. She ran out of the room, leaving a trail of gray dust footprints on the runner rug. We heard the front door slam moments later. Silence returned to the study. Ethan looked at the damaged safe. He looked at the holes in the floor. He looked at me. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking, "I'm so sorry. I didn't see it. I thought she was—" "It's okay, son," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Some locks are designed to be picked. You just didn't know you were the mechanism." But we weren't done yet. Shelby was gone, but the mess remained. And frankly, the safe was now permanently locked. I looked at the core drill. "Well," I said, patting the orange machine, "since she paid for the rental, we might as well use it to open the safe properly. I need to get those lead fishing weights out." "Can we save it?" Ethan asked. "No," I said. "The relocker fired. This safe is scrap metal now. But don't worry, I know a guy who sells vaults. We'll get a better one. Maybe one with a biometric lock that doesn't care about birthdays." Ethan managed a weak smile. We spent the rest of the day cleaning. We swept up the dust, we unbolted the drill. But as I swept, I found one last thing Shelby had left behind in her panic. It was lying under the desk. Her notepad. It contained a list of dates. My birthday, Ethan's birthday, my late wife's death day. But at the bottom, there was a name circled in red ink. Dr. Aris. "Ethan," I said, reading the note, "check the transaction history on the joint account." Ethan pulled out his phone. "Why?" "Just check for payments to Dr. Aris." A moment later, Ethan gasped. $3,000 last month. Consulting fee. "She didn't just fool us," I said grimly. "She paid off the doctor to diagnose me with confusion. The medical records were bought."
This wasn't just theft. It was a conspiracy to strip me of my legal rights. I looked at the phone. "Call the police, Ethan. This isn't a breakup anymore. It's a crime scene." The police officers were polite, but they were not helpful. Officer Miller took notes on his pad, looking from the heavy industrial drill bolted to my hardwood floor to the shattered safe dial. He shook his head. "It's a mess, Mr. Vance," Officer Miller said, snapping his notebook shut. "But technically, she lived here, and she's married to your son. Unless you want to press charges for criminal damage to property right now, this is largely a civil matter. It's a divorce dispute." "She tried to rob us," Ethan said, his voice raw. He was sitting on the edge of the desk, staring at the floor. "Intent is hard to prove without a confession or the stolen goods in hand," Miller sighed. "If she shows up again, call 911, get a restraining order. But for now, change the locks." The officers left. The front door clicked shut, leaving us in the dusty silence of the house. I looked at the floor safe. It was ruined. The relocker bolts had driven themselves deep into the frame. It would take a plasma torch hours to cut through that steel now. My gold, or rather the lead weights I had swapped, was sealed inside forever. Ethan stood up. He walked to the window and watched the squad car drive away. "I didn't know, Dad. I swear. I knew she liked poker nights with her friends, but $50,000? How do you lose that much without anyone seeing it?" "Addiction is a professional hider, son," I said, wheeling my chair over to him. "It lives in the shadows. It tells you little lies until the big lies feel normal." "I checked the joint account," Ethan said, pulling out his phone. His hand was shaking. "It's worse than we thought. The savings? Gone. The retirement IRA? She liquidated it last week. The penalty fees alone are massive. She emptied us, Dad. We have nothing." He looked at me, tears welling in his eyes. "I brought this on us. I let her in." "We still have the house," I said firmly, "and we have my assets. I didn't let her touch my accounts. We'll rebuild, Ethan. You can stay here." "I can't," Ethan said. "She knows where this is. She has keys." "We'll rekey the house tonight. I have spare cores in the garage. Being a master locksmith has its perks." We spent the next 3 hours changing every lock in the house. It was good physical work. It kept our hands busy and our minds off the betrayal. We installed Medeco deadbolts, high security, drill resistant. By the time the sun went down, the house was a fortress again. But a fortress is only safe if the enemy is on the outside. At 7 p.m., my phone rang. It was the landline in the study. "Don't answer it," Ethan said from the kitchen. "It might be the detective." I picked up the receiver. "Vance residence."
"Mr. Vance," a voice said. It wasn't the detective. It was deep, calm, and utterly terrifying. It was the same voice I had heard on Shelby's speakerphone days ago. "I believe your daughter-in-law has left the building." I gripped the phone. "Who is this?" "My name is Mr. Kincaid. I manage private equity for concerned investors. Shelby tells me she failed to secure the withdrawal. She tells me you intercepted her." "She was robbing me," I said coldly, "and now she's gone. If you want money, call the police." "The police don't handle my kind of accounts," Kincaid laughed softly. "Here is the situation, Mr. Vance. Shelby borrowed money against collateral she claimed she had access to, your gold. Since she has defaulted, and since you prevented the transaction, I consider you partially responsible for the delay." "That's not how the law works," I said. "That is how my law works," Kincaid replied. "Shelby says there's $2 million in gold in that floor safe. She says you swapped it for lead, which means the gold is somewhere else in the house. Is that correct?" I didn't answer. I looked at the dark window. "I'm sending a crew to collect, Mr. Vance, tonight. You can open the door and hand it over and nobody gets hurt. Or we can come inside and tear the walls down until we find it. Your choice." "We have guns," I lied. I hate guns. I preferred traps. "We have more," Kincaid said. "See you soon." Click. I hung up the phone. My hand wasn't shaking. It was steady. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a siege. "Who was that?" Ethan asked, walking into the study with a pizza box he had just retrieved from the porch. "Trouble," I said. "Big trouble. Shelby's bookie. He thinks I have the gold in the house. He's coming to take it." Ethan dropped the pizza. "We have to leave, now. We have to go to a hotel." "No," I shook my head. "If we leave, they burn the house down to find the stash, or they wait for us to come back. This guy isn't going to stop until he gets paid or gets caught." "So we call 911. Ethan reached for his phone. "Police response time out here is 15 minutes, and if these guys are professionals, they'll be in and out in 10. By the time the cops arrive, we'll be tied up or dead." I rolled over to the wall safe hidden behind the painting of a ship. It was my backup safe, smaller but still secure. I spun the dial. "Dad, what are you doing?" "I'm opening the vault," I said. Inside, there was no gold. There were tools, strange tools, flashbang grenades I had acquired from a military surplus contact, a high-voltage stun baton, and a heavy canvas bag filled with fine white powder. "What is that?" Ethan asked. "Magnesium shavings and iron oxide. When you mix them, you get thermite. It burns at 4,000 degrees. It melts engine blocks." "Why do you have thermite?" Ethan said, staring at me like a stranger. "Because sometimes," I said, wheeling toward the front door, "you can't pick the lock. Sometimes you have to weld the door shut." I looked at the clock. 7:30 p.m. "Ethan," I ordered, "go to the breaker panel in the garage. Kill the main power. We're going dark. If they want to come into my house, they're going to do it on my terms, and my terms are pitch black." "Dad, this is crazy," Ethan argued. "We're accountants and retirees. We're not action heroes." "I spent 40 years defeating burglars, son," I said, checking the battery on the stun baton. "Tonight, I'm not the locksmith. I'm the lock." The house went dark as Ethan pulled the main breaker in the garage. The sudden silence was amplified by the lack of the refrigerator's hum and the HVAC fan. I sat in my wheelchair at the end of the long hallway, a dark shadow against the darker wall. In my lap, I held the flashbang grenade and a pair of heavy-duty earmuffs. Beside me on the floor, Ethan crouched, clutching a baseball bat he hadn't swung since Little League. I could hear his breathing, fast, shallow, terrified. "Stay low," I whispered, adjusting the grip on the stun baton. "They're not going to knock." Outside, headlights swept across the drawn curtains of the living room. Tires crunched on gravel. They killed the engine, But I didn't hear car doors slam. These were professionals. They pushed the doors closed gently until the latch clicked. I checked the tablet strapped to my arm. The pinhole cameras had infrared sensors. The screen showed 3 heat signatures approaching the front porch. The lead figure, Kincaid, was massive. He wasn't holding a lockpick. He was holding a cordless breaching ram. "Front door," I whispered to Ethan. "Get to the pantry." Ethan scrambled away on his hands and knees. Boom! The front door didn't open. It disintegrated. The battering ram shattered the lockjam, sending wood splinters into the foyer. Kincaid stepped through the ruin, followed by 2 men in balaclavas. They held pistols with suppressors, long black silencers that meant they didn't intend for the neighbors to hear the execution. They moved efficiently, sweeping the living room with tactical flashlights. The beams cut through the dust, blindingly bright. "Clear," one man whispered. "Upstairs," Kincaid ordered. "Find the son. The old man is mine." They moved towards the stairs. This was the moment. My hallway isn't just a hallway. When I remodeled in 2005, I installed a specific security feature for my own peace of mind. Reinforced steel pocket doors hidden in the archways at both ends of the corridor. I controlled them with a dedicated battery backup wired to a remote in my pocket. I let them walk past the first archway. 1 step, 2 steps, all 3 of them were in the kill zone. I pressed the button. Clang, thud. The steel doors shot out of the walls on pressurized tracks. The door behind them slammed shut, sealing off the foyer. The door in front of them slammed shut, blocking the stairs. They were trapped in a 15-foot stretch of hallway. "What the hell?" Kincaid shouted, spinning around. He fired 2 rounds into the steel door behind him. Ping, ping. The bullets flattened against the 1/4-inch plate. I was safely on the other side of the forward door, sitting in the kitchen entryway, but I wasn't done. There was a ventilation grill located high on the wall inside their trap, the same kind of vent Shelby tried to hide her recordings in.
I stood up from my chair, ignoring the ache in my legs. I walked to the kitchen side of the wall. I pulled the pin on the flashbang grenade. It's a Model 7290 distraction device. It produces 175 decibels of sound and a blinding flash of 2.4 million candela. I dropped it into the customized chute I had built into the ductwork. It rolled down the angled pipe and fell out of the vent right into the enclosed hallway with them. "Fire in the hole," I muttered, clamping the earmuffs over my ears and shutting my eyes tight. Bang! The sound was physical. It shook the floorboards. Even through the walls and the earmuffs, I felt the pressure wave thump against my chest. Inside the trap, the screams were instant. 175 decibels in a confined steel space isn't just loud. It scrambles your equilibrium. It turns your inner ear into jelly. Kincaid and his men were disoriented, blinded, and deafened. I grabbed the stun baton and hit the retract button on the forward door. The steel panel hissed open. Kincaid was on his knees, clutching his ears, his gun lying on the floor 3 feet away. The other 2 men were staggering against the walls, dry heaving from the shockwave. The air smelled of burnt magnesium and fear. I walked up to the nearest thug. He didn't even see me. I jammed the stun baton into his neck and held the trigger. 500,000 volts arced blue and angry. He dropped like a sack of cement. The second thug tried to raise his weapon, swinging it wildly. Ethan surged out of the pantry. He didn't hesitate this time. He swung the baseball bat with a primal roar, connecting solidly with the man's wrist. The bone snapped with a sickening crunch. The gun flew across the floor. "Get down!" Ethan screamed, adrenaline making his voice crack. That left Kincaid. Kincaid was tougher than his men. He was shaking his head, fighting the concussion. He saw me standing there, an old man in a cardigan holding a sparking baton. He roared, stumbling to his feet, pulling a knife from his boot since he had lost his gun. "I'm gonna gut you!" Kincaid bellowed, charging forward blindly. I didn't move. I didn't try to tase him. I just pointed to the floor.
"Ethan!" I shouted. "The latch!" Ethan stomped on a floorboard release near the baseboard. The runner rug beneath Kincaid's feet gave way. I hadn't drilled the safe, but I had removed the floorboards covering the crawlspace access hours ago and covered the hole with the rug. Kincaid stepped onto nothing. He plunged straight down into the 4-foot crawlspace. His chin hit the joist on the way down with a wet smack. He crumpled into the dirt below, groaning, his knife clattering into the darkness. I walked to the edge of the hole and looked down. Kincaid was writhing in the dust, nursing a broken jaw. "Welcome to the basement," I said, catching my breath. "The ventilation is poor, but the security is excellent." Ethan stood over the other 2 men with bat raised, chest heaving. Did we win?" "We survived," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder to steady him. "There's a difference. Tie them up. Use the zip ties from my bag. Double loops." We secured the 2 unconscious thugs. Then I dragged a heavy oak desk over the crawlspace opening, trapping Kincaid below. He was shouting threats from the darkness, but his voice was muffled and slurred. "Now what?" Ethan asked, looking at the carnage in our hallway. "Do we call the police?" "Not yet," I said, checking the tablet again. "We call the FBI." "Why the FBI?" Ethan asked. "Because Kincaid isn't just a bookie. He's running a money laundering operation across state lines. And thanks to Shelby, we just became witnesses to a federal conspiracy." I dialed the number for the Chicago field office, but before I could hit send, the smell hit me. It wasn't gun smoke. It was chemical, acrid. I looked toward the garage. Wisps of white smoke were curling under the doorframe. "Dad, smoke!" Ethan whispered. One of the thugs hadn't been completely out. Before we tied him, he had managed to kick over the bag of thermite I had left near the door, and in the chaos of the flashbang, a spark, maybe from the stun baton, maybe from a stray bullet hitting a nail, had ignited it. Thermite doesn't explode, it burns. It melts through anything in its path, and right now it was melting through the floor of the hallway directly above the gas main line. "Out!" I grabbed Ethan. "Get out, now!" We scrambled for the back door, leaving the thugs tied up in the foyer. "We can't leave them," Ethan yelled, stopping. "They'll burn!" "Cut them loose," I shouted, throwing him a knife from my pocket. "Do it fast, we have seconds!" Ethan ran back. He slashed the zip ties on the 2 groggy men. "Run!" Ethan screamed. "Fire!" The thugs didn't argue. They scrambled out the front door, dragging each other, forgetting Kincaid in the hole. "What about Kincaid?" Ethan looked at the desk covering the hole. "He's under the floor," I yelled. "He's safer there than we are here. The gas line is in the ceiling of the basement. If it blows, the force goes up." We dove out the back door into the garden just as the kitchen windows turned bright orange. Whoosh! The gas line ruptured. A fireball consumed the kitchen and the hallway. The force of the blast blew the patio doors off their hinges, showering us with glass. We rolled into the wet grass, covering our heads, as my house, my fortress, my vault became an inferno. I lay on my back, watching the flames lick the night sky. The sirens were already wailing in the distance. The police would be here in minutes, the fire department shortly after. I looked at Ethan. His face was soot-stained, but he was alive. "The gold," Ethan coughed, looking at the burning house. "Dad, the gold!" "The lead weights are melting," I corrected, watching the roof collapse. "The gold is safe." "Where is it?" Ethan asked, looking at the burning house. "Where did you hide $2 million in gold?" I smiled, watching the blue lights of the police cruisers reflect off the trees. "Where nobody ever looks," I said. "I buried it in the flower bed under your mother's rose bushes 3 years ago. A thief looks for a safe. They never bring a shovel to a garden."
The flashing lights of the fire trucks painted the suburban street in chaotic strobes of red and white. Neighbors stood on their lawns in pajamas, watching as 40 years of my life turned into charcoal and ash. The firefighters had doused the flames, but the smell, wet wood and burnt history hung heavy in the air. Ethan sat on the bumper of the ambulance, a thermal blanket wrapped around his shoulders. He wasn't looking at the fire. He was looking at me. "We're homeless," Ethan said, his voice hollow. "No," I said, wiping soot from my forehead. "We're liquid. There's a difference." A shout from the ruins drew our attention. Firefighters were pulling a man out of what used to be the hallway. It was Kincaid. He was covered in soot, coughing violently, and sporting a nasty bruise on his chin, but he was alive. The crawl space had acted as a bunker, shielding him from the worst of the blast heat, just as I calculated. As soon as they dragged him to the grass, 2 FBI agents were on him. Kincaid didn't fight. He held out his hands for the cuffs, looking more relieved to be arrested than burnt alive. "That's the bookie," I told the lead agent, pointing a shaking finger. "Check his boot. He carries a knife." The investigation that followed was extensive. The FBI wasn't interested in the fire as much as they were interested in Kincaid's ledger. When they raided his office, they found a list of debtors. Shelby's name was right at the top, next to a debt of $50,000. But she wasn't just a debtor. The texts on Kincaid's phone revealed she'd been feeding him information about my safe for weeks. That made her an accessory to armed robbery and conspiracy. They picked her up at O'Hare Airport the next morning. She was trying to board a flight to Tulum using a credit card she stole from Ethan's wallet before she left. I saw the footage of her arrest on the news. She wasn't wearing industrial goggles or holding a drill. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and crying as agents escorted her out of the terminal. She tried to play the victim one last time, screaming that her husband made her do it, but nobody was buying her ticket anymore. Shelby pled guilty to avoid a federal racketeering charge. She got 7 years. Kincaid got 20. Even Dr. Aris, the doctor she paid off, lost his license and is facing fraud charges for falsifying medical records. The house was a total loss, but insurance covers houses. It doesn't cover betrayal. 6 months have passed. Ethan and I used the insurance money, and yes, the gold, to buy a smaller place in the city. A condo, steel-reinforced concrete, 19th floor, excellent security. We retrieved the gold the day after the fire. It was a strange sight, 2 men digging up rose bushes in the middle of a burnt-out lot while a demolition crew waited. When the shovel hit the first waterproof pelican case, Ethan cried. "I thought you were crazy," Ethan admitted, lifting a heavy gold bar from the dirt. "Burying this much money."
"Security isn't about steel walls, Ethan," I told him. "It's about knowing where your enemy won't look." Ethan is doing better. He filed for divorce while Shelby was in custody. It was finalized last week. He's thinner now, sharper. He stopped being the nice guy who assumes everyone has good intentions. He started asking questions. Yesterday, he caught a billing error at his accounting firm that saved a client $10,000. "Good catch," I told him over dinner. "I checked the logs," he said, tapping his temple, "just like you taught me." I don't keep a floor safe anymore. I keep the gold in a bank deposit box downtown. I'm retired, for real this time. I spend my days building model ships. It requires the same patience as cracking a safe, but the stakes are lower. If I mess up, I just use glue. I still think about that night. I think about the moment Shelby started drilling. I think about how close she came to destroying us, not by stealing the money, but by stealing our trust. She thought I was a fragile old mechanism she could force open. She didn't realize that some locks are booby-trapped. You can install all the cameras you want. You can buy the thickest steel money can buy. But the only security that matters is the people you let inside the perimeter. If you can't trust the person sleeping down the hall, you aren't safe. You're just waiting for the drill to start spinning. I'm Sam Vance. I'm 67 years old. I don't have a house, but I have my son. I have my dignity,
and I have the satisfaction of knowing that the only thing Shelby cracked was her own life. This is John Vengeance. If you enjoyed seeing a master technician disable a thief, turn that like button until it clicks. Share this story with anyone who needs a reminder to check their locks and their in-laws. Stay safe, stay sharp, and always check the dial before you sleep.